Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me. Probably the only person among your panelists not to be a historian, not to have a PhD, so sorry for bringing the level down. But I'm handsome and funny, and so you will enjoy the next 15 minutes. You've heard a lot about non-state actors, about conflict, about great powers vying in the region. I thought I would narrow the aperture and talk and try to demystify the key Gulf states, which have really emerged as big players on the international scene, whether in terms of geopolitics, in terms of economics, in terms of technology, and so on. In the previous panel, people have alluded to that. I'm lucky enough to have lived in 2 out of these 3 countries, Saudi and the UAE. Qatar is the third one. So I want to contextualize the rise, but I also want to talk about the limits of their power, their appeal, and so on. Usually when we talk about them these days, it's in superlatives. I just want to make sure that there's enough qualifiers attached to that. These 3 countries are both at the periphery of the Middle East. They're lucky geographically, in a way, and they're very much at the center. Because they're entangled in geopolitical rivalries, because their prosperity depends on the stability of the environment, because they're expected by external countries to have a role, to finance, to intervene, to deploy ideological muscle, religious prestige, or other forms of power. And so on. They also do it because they are driven, and I'll get to that, by different forces. Some, domestic, others more linked to their view of the region. First, these 3 countries have proven quite good at surfing the fast-changing geopolitical landscape that we see. They've had a very dim view of Western powers and Western leaderships for the past 20 years. They look at Iraq, they look at Afghanistan, they look at the Red Line, they look at the Syria 2013, and they basically say, you know what, these guys cannot order the region. Now, they had expectations that perhaps could have never been met. But from their perspective, hey, we're spending billions in weapons, we're giving you preferential access, we're investing in your countries and so on. The return is please order the region. Well, you can't anymore. They're also, because of their geographical position, they're very attuned to shifts in global power. They sit next door to all those rising regions in Asia, in Africa. They want to be the hub. They have this contact, and they have felt this shift in power, in global power, much before you guys have. They were much more cynical and realistic, I would say, about how the global politics would shift. And they're more comfortable in this new world than most of your countries are. It's a new, messy world, but it's also a less normative one. You can't say that the values you preach and the order you've built, somehow has delivered, has it? Okay, they've been telling you, we're going to be cynical, we're going to be transactional, we're going to chart our course. I'm not saying they're right, just to be clear. I'm describing their position. And so what we see them is rethink their place on the global scene. But they face a few fundamental dilemmas. One of them is their security remains in the West. This is where their security guarantors, their weapons providers, their cybersecurity companies, and whatever, those capable to extend security protection lie. So the US primarily, France and the UK behind. But their prosperity is in the East. There is one statistic that really struck me when I read it. 2/3 of Chinese exports to Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, 2/3 of those exports go through the Dubai port. I can only talk in superlatives about the trading relationship between the Gulf states and China, but not only. When the Emiratis wanted to build nuclear power plants, who they went with? Not the French, not the American Japanese consortiums, the South Korean one. And guess what? The South Koreans delivered on time and almost on budget. There's a cost overrun. I live in the UK. That's not what's happening there. Ask your neighbor Finland how they're doing with their reactor. The point is that they're discovering, that the rest of the world can also meet their needs. And so they're trying to navigate these two. You want to add to that dilemma? Their energy politics are somehow intertwined with Russia. And we saw this with OPEC+. So they're constantly more than triangulating, right? They're trying to figure out how to make all these relationships fit to their benefit without putting them in some very difficult spots. So far, they succeeded, but it's a high-stakes game. So what are they trying to do? They try to diversify relationships. Any middle power that wants to trade, welcome. Any technology that's available out there, we want to invest in it, we want to acquire it, and so on. We want to add layers of protection. We want to make sure that we have friends everywhere. The biggest fear of the Gulf states is to have a repeat of Kuwait 1990. At the time, yes, the US was the dominant power. It was the beginning of that unipolar moment. But the fear was, who knew Kuwait then, right? Now, if something happens, you cannot say you don't know what the UAE is because they hosted Expo 2020. You cannot say you don't know what Qatar is because this is where the World Cup happened 2 years ago. It's a strategic marketing, it's a strategic branding. They want to exist at the center. And so those relationships are very important. They also, especially Saudi Arabia, think of themselves as part of that G20. Saudi, for instance, wants to see itself, and is, it is part of that grouping, but that's where it belongs. It's not the leader of just, needy Arab and Muslim countries that, just need a funder, need largesse, and so on. They see themselves as having moved into that important grouping. So you're adding all that, but and always, all these layers, all these new relationships are compared to what you get from the West. And what you get from the West is often conditional, it's often ineffective, it can be toxic, the relationship is volatile, right? To try to think about US policy on, Iran, right? How much has it changed? They're also trying to, be a bit more independent in terms of their security. So they've invested in defense modernization. We see one of the biggest efforts at the moment. So they're buying more stuff. They're integrating more stuff. They're building a defense industry at home. They're investing in air defenses. They look at what's happening these days, and they would like that protection. Not going to happen at that level, but they would like. They're very aware. They're very afraid that they're particularly exposed in this new way. But they have different tools of statecraft as well. There is a level of geoeconomic statecraft. They do believe in connectivity agendas. They invest massively in infrastructure. They've integrated AI to their ports faster than most other countries. They're thinking about all these links and so. They have a digital agenda. It was mentioned earlier. They, have the resources to buy the chips. They have the energy if you're the UAE to run those massive factories. What you don't necessarily have is the amount of talent you need and the thinking about how to deploy it. But that could happen. They have an energy agenda. They understand that the energy transition is on, but they still want to sell oil. They want to sell it to abroad, and they want to adopt renewables at home where possible. So the more oil you free at home, the more you can sell it, and so on. And they will shape global discussions on that, very cynically at times. They have an aid agenda that is linked to their political agenda. if they want to stabilize a country, they will provide aid. If the UAE wants to win the seat of IRENA, which is the UN agency for renewable energy, they will send big ambassadors around the world, but they will be also very generous in places in the Caribbean and in Latin America or Asia, because that wins you a vote. They have other strategies of influence. I mentioned the World Cup. Well, it's coming to Saudi Arabia. PSG just won the Champions League. Go PSG. That's what the Qataris. That's the Qatari club. Hey, Manchester City was big, and that was an Emirati owned club. So this is, I go back to the strategy of branding. You know, how do you exist in the public eye to make sure that you have friends everywhere all the time? I could go on and on. They have also actually quite sophisticated strategies of investment. Their sovereign wealth funds mostly are very cautious players. They will invest in markets, in bonds. They'll be careful. These are the savings. But they're so wealthy, they have other investment vehicles that will take risks, and we see them operating. They are involved in so many aspects of Western economic life. They're mostly invested in the West, by the way, 82%. It gives you a sense of how they think long term. Now, let's talk a bit about the obstacles. Don't want to be just all sunny and shiny. The first one is they are in constant competition. It doesn't necessarily mean conflict. Competition is not all. We had that moment, the Qatar crisis, 2017, 2021. It ended because people realized that you can never win those kind of conflict. It's just too costly, reputationally, financially, etc. But you are still in constant competition. Because first, you share similar development models. All these countries are trying to do almost the same, with some changes at the margins. The second point is there's an utter lack of regional integration, which means that there's not real a momentum that pulls people up. It's not the EU common market. Okay, it's not that. Then there is a very fluid geopolitical landscape. Yes, I said they're very agile, they're good at this, but at one point it can get at you. The how to navigate US-China is one of the biggest headache they have these days. Like, where is exactly the American line? Because you really want them on board. The Chinese are a lot more easy to work with from that perspective, right? 1 minute, it's okay. I'm almost there. Oh, yes, okay, so I'll talk. And I say, I'll finish with karaoke, don't worry. I'll have the problem is to be too complacent, that thinking that because you got it right so far on surfing those shifting geopolitics, you're gonna do it forever. The problem with that thinking is it works until it doesn't, and when it doesn't, the cost may be very high. Now, they are very cynical because, and I remember I was in the region then and meeting with officials. I remember when all Western countries came to the rescue of Ukraine, as it should have been, was the right call, and then they were going to go and try to convince the Gulf states to join, to commit. This is the thing, and they're like, guys, we don't trust you. I mean, you've left Afghanistan 6 months ago and look at the debacle. Second, we understand Putin's language. Third, this is your regional war. The way you consider that our wars are regional wars, this is your regional war. Don't make it about us. Then your issue of norms, and this is where the double standard argument, which, by the way, I believe in, kicks in. And obviously, looking at the horrors of Gaza and how, this is not even a topic for discussion these days, you realize how the rest of the world looks at this and say, perhaps we'll not buy the case. I'm not saying that's my view, just to be clear. But they look at those geopolitics and they say, well, we'll stay on top of them. They have also a region in turmoil. It's not, if you ask me in their dreams, yes, Saudi or the UAE would love to, move itself as it is with whatever is underneath and be dropped in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? That was a much nicer neighborhood. But they exist in this in this region, and they've tried to shape it, sometimes at high cost, for themselves, for others. We see how nasty the competition has been in Yemen, in Sudan these days, and elsewhere. But they cannot escape. And they face a completely different situation, which is up until last year, the revisionist power in the region was Iran, and all the others were status quo. Today, the revisionist power in the region is Israel, and they don't like what they're seeing. They don't like Israeli military dominance the way it is exposing itself. 3 more things that I promised I'll say. First one, they're running short on energy, so those of you who are interested, invest in SMRs. Second, talent. They have not enough of it, and they have to move on. And finally, the most precious resource, they don't have enough time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emile.